Although it might sound strange coming from one of your rabbis, I want to be honest with you that in these last 11 months, there have been times when it's been ridiculously hard, if not impossible, to pray. I'm not just talking about not being in the mood. We all get tired, we all have long weeks, we'd all rather choose another melody or so on. What I'm talking about, though, is a fundamental dissonance between the words on the page and how we're actually feeling, or where we are actually at as individuals or as a community. I'll give you the example. Every morning we recite the prayer, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who frees the captive. We also have a number of variations of this blessing. It appears in our Amidah that we just sang together, Somech noflim, urofeh cholim, umatir asurim. God who supports the fallen, heals the sick, and frees the captive. On Shabbat morning, we find the following passages. Immediately after Psalm 150, this passage of praise and joy, we read, "You give voice to the silenced and freedom to the captive." And again in the morning on Shabbat, leading into Michamocha, we read, "You free the captive and redeem the oppressed." Perhaps it seems obvious why those words don't quite resonate right now, and I'll admit that they've taken on a special kind of soreness after the terrible news of the execution of the 6 hostages by Hamas just about 2 weeks ago. It feels, truthfully, almost empty to pray to a God exalted as one who redeems, who frees those who are held captive, when those 6 precious souls, Hirsch, Eden, Carmel, Ori, and Almog, and Alex, Zichronam Livracha, were not freed, were not returned to their families alive. It feels, truthfully, almost hollow to declare that God hears the cries of the oppressed when we know that as we speak, 101 other souls are in captivity still, under God only knows what conditions. It feels, truthfully, rather disheartening to feel that these words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts are not being heard or heeded by the one who is meant to answer when called upon. Cynically, we could then ask the question, why pray at all? What meaning do those words hold if we're not sure that they're going to be spoken into being? Well, let's explore a few different ideas. Prayer firstly expresses our hopes, our fears, the innermost workings of our souls. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, in an extraordinary essay titled On Prayer, from which we'll largely draw our inspiration, posits that this can be through either praise, as we've heard about, or even shock, these 2 strange sides of what he suggests are the same coin. Prayer becomes a vehicle through which we can, as may feel appropriate for this moment, express our shock at the state of the world, a world in which there is so much to be shocked about. Prayer, subsequently, is not a citadel for selfish concerns, to quote Heschel, but where we can show our concern for other people's plights as well as our own, that we may learn to be worthy of the promise, the hope, and the vision that prayer can lead us to. The promise, Heschel continues, may be found through beginning from a place of praise. Na'aseh v'nishma, Heschel says, first we will do and then we will listen, or in his words, first we will sing and then we will understand. To do so is to transcend the limits of our human boundaries and knowledge, to remove, at least partially, some of the roadblocks that stand in the way of responding to that never-ending beginning, lest we risk falling into a state of despair and dismay. As we will soon hear on Yom Kippur, and as Heschel uplifts, Uvacharta b'chayim, choose life. Prayer thus becomes a dynamic form of living, one that can be restorative and reparative to the heart, mind, and soul as we continue to face trials and tribulations. Prayer thus becomes the place where we can reconcile what is in our hearts with the deeds of our hands, to start to build sanctuaries brick by brick in an age where overwhelming forces conspire to destroy our sense of peace, and with it, our ability to pray. Prayer, as a result, leads to action. Rabbi Heschel will declare that a mitzvah is a prayer in the form of a deed. In making such a statement, he is conveying that prayer and actions are two immutable sides of the same coin, that we cannot have one without the other, or the picture is incomplete and the human coin is not fully minted. Indeed, he is the one who, when marching with Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama, came back and declared that he went out of a desire to pray with his feet, that famous quote. What this does is reshape our concept of what a prayer can be in the first place. If prayer can be an act of kindness, an act of justice, an act of love, an act of compassion, then prayer is not just the words of our mouths, but the ways in which we behave and what we do to bring those words to life and live out those ideas and values in the world of the here and now. It recalled a brief but poignant video released just yesterday by Rachel Goldberg and John Polin, parents of Hirsch Goldberg Polin of blessed memory. Despite their pain and heartache as they mourn their murdered son, they appear wearing the strips of masking tape with the number, at the time, 342 on it. The number of days since the war began, and the day since all the hostages were taken, including, but not only, their beloved Hirsch. In the depths of their grief, they call out, naming their sincerest prayer that their government and their people do all they can to bring home the remaining hostages, that no family should experience what they're experiencing or go through what they're going through, God forbid. Their prayer, in short, is that their anguish will be turned into action, that others will continue to march alongside them to, as Rachel says very practically, keep writing to the White House, keep writing to the Prime Minister, keep wearing the tape, keep going out and advocating. In essence, their prayer is for us and for them is to keep praying with our feet in memory of their son, their sweet child of light, love, and peace, along with the 5 precious others. Prayer, crucially, lets us know that we're not alone. There's a reason that I strongly believe that John and Rachel are not alone, and that is because, as my colleagues might say, Judaism is not a solo sport. There is a reason I strongly believe that we as Jews pray in a minyan, that we do not sit shiva by ourselves, that it is so meaningful when our B'nai Mitzvah students are called up in front of both their loved ones and our congregation at large to the Torah, and that our prayers are largely composed in plural form. Being in community to partake in ritual, whether it's a worship service or life cycle event or what have you, reminds us that we do not exist for our own sake, that we are part of something larger and more significant than ourselves. We might think that praying in community might be counterintuitive. Surely we can concentrate more intently when we're alone, when we don't have the distraction. To digress from Heschel momentarily, our sages will in fact say, no, this is not the case. That it is exactly communal worship in which God's presence may be found. That togetherness enables us to make up for each other's shortcomings, that engenders a spirit of goodwill towards one another, where our prayer immediately ascends to the heavens, and where we find strength in coming together for a common cause, despite and in spite of our imperfections. A modern sage, Rabbi Harold Kushner of blessed memory, concurs. He teaches us that the congregating may be even more important than the words we speak, as the communal whole becomes more than the sum of its individual parts. That maybe, just maybe, we come to synagogue because we find something here that we could not find on our own. That in coming together, we create the mood and the moment in which God is present as we find solace in the others around us seeking the same kind of encounter that we ourselves are seeking. Back to Heschel, he notes that in this togetherness, we are better equipped to grapple with the great mysteries of life, such as the difficulty of praying or of why bad things happen to good people and vice versa. Heschel proclaims this as the divine predicament, which ironically casts God as, in his words, being in captivity too, and of God having a unique experience of exile as well. Whether it is with others or with our God, our prayer is thus a salve for the soul's ailment of isolation, at times of joy and at times of distress. And so, according to Heschel, we are never truly alone, because God is searching for the answers and searching for us too. As we hallow time and space in God's name, in partnership and relationship with one another and the divine, we can then commiserate over life's great dichotomies and dilemmas. Prayer, conversely, is a place to come home to be with ourselves and to reflect. Heschel compares the one who does not or cannot pray to a person who's been evicted from their home, writing, "A soul without prayer is a soul without a home." Prayer allows us, therefore, to return home, including during those moments where we might not quite feel at home in our own skins. Prayer enables us to come back to that place where we are understood, where we can be authentic, where we can find a refuge to gather our thoughts and figure out what our foundations are, no matter how shaky they may seem at times. The home that prayer builds, Heschel is clear, is not a space to retreat or to regress to a previous, more comfortable iteration of who we were. Rather, it is that somewhere which is safe and warm in order that we may be given the independence to learn, to contemplate, and to ultimately grow into the best version of who we can be. How apt then that we now find ourselves smack bang in the middle of the Hebrew month of Elul, with our Jewish calendar pointing us in the direction of this introspection. It is precisely in this month that we are encouraged, even expected, to begin a journey towards teshuvah. Whilst we often translate teshuvah as repentance, it may be more accurately thought of as a turning or as returning. As we then pray during this heightened month of holiness and look towards 5785 unbelievably, what better time to focus inwards, that we may come home and again and perhaps leave a window cracked open in order that the light may get in. In other words, I'm not under any illusion that to pray means that what I send out into the ether is going to be returned in kind or that my request will be responded to. Yet the homely comfort of prayer, its poetry and its melody, means that I and we have an outlet for expressing and processing what lies in the recesses of our hearts and minds. I am not under any illusions that prayer is going to solve all the problems of the world. Yet sitting with fellow friends and colleagues and congregants in prayer has certainly meant feeling less alone in a world that is and that can be scary or sad or overwhelming. I'm not under any illusions that prayer is going to make miracles happen. Yet, the hope behind prayer is for that good intention to be translated into action, each of us making small steps to improve our broken world. As captured in this final thought from Rabbi Heschel, prayer cannot bring water to a parched field or mend a broken bridge or rebuild a broken city, but prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, and rebuild a broken will. Baruch atah Adonai, matir asurim. Shabbat shalom.